Rain slid down the glass walls of the luxury shopping complex, turning the lights inside into blurred gold streaks. A police cruiser idled at the curb, engine humming low, its lights off but unmistakable. People slowed as they passed. Some stopped, phones came out, almost by habit. Near the entrance, a uniformed police officer stood with his arms crossed, posture relaxed in a way that signaled control. In front of him was a black single father, jacket thin, shoulders tense, holding his young son close. The boy's backpack lay on the ground, half open, notebook soaked, pages curling as water crept in. The child looked up, rain clinging to his eyelashes. His voice shook, small and honest. "Dad, am I not allowed to be here?" The officer let out a quiet laugh, not loud enough to cause a scene, just enough to sting. A couple nearby exchanged looks. Someone sighed and turned away. Another person raised their phone higher, adjusting focus. The father felt his son's fingers tighten around his hand. He didn't shout, he didn't move. He stood still, jaw set, eyes forward, as if saying the wrong word might make everything worse. Traffic hissed behind them. The mall doors slid open and shut, warm air brushing past, close enough to feel and yet completely out of reach. The officer leaned slightly closer, confident, unhurried. In that instant, with rain tapping steadily and strangers watching in silence, a line was crossed, a moment people would later replay, argue over, and regret scrolling past, because this was the beginning of something none of them could undo. Marcus Hale learned early how to move through the city without being noticed, not because he wanted to disappear, but because experience had taught him it was safer that way. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, he slipped out of their narrow apartment while the building still slept. The hallway lights flickered with a tired buzz. Someone's television murmured behind a closed door. Marcus kept his head down, his shoulders relaxed, his steps quiet. Years ago, he'd learned that attention came with a cost. By the time the city woke up, Marcus had already crossed it. He worked maintenance at a downtown office complex, glass towers, polished floors, the kind of place where people walked past him without really seeing him. He fixed broken locks, replaced flickering lights, cleared spills before meetings began. His supervisor barely knew his last name. There were no benefits worth mentioning, no job security, just a steady paycheck and the understanding that if he caused trouble, he'd be replaced without discussion. Marcus accepted that. Not because he lacked pride, but because pride didn't pay rent. Every afternoon, he picked up his son, Eli, from school. Eli was 9, thin, sharp-eyed, with a habit of noticing things adults missed. He talked about cracked sidewalks, about teachers who smiled differently depending on who raised their hand, about how security guards followed certain parents longer than others during pickup. Marcus listened more than he spoke. At home, their apartment smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. Light filtered through blinds that never quite closed evenly. Eli did his homework at the small kitchen table while Marcus cooked simple meals, rice, chicken, vegetables. Nothing fancy, enough. On the shelf near Eli's bed sat a small brass compass. Its surface was scratched, the needle no longer perfectly aligned. It had belonged to Marcus's father once. Eli liked to turn it slowly, watching the needle hesitate before settling somewhere uncertain. "Still works," Eli said one night. Marcus didn't correct him. The compass wasn't about direction anymore. It was about remembering you had one. Their bond wasn't loud or performative. It lived in routines, in shared silence, in the way Marcus always checked Eli's backpack twice before school, in how Eli leaned against his father's side during late-night movies, his breathing slowing before the credits rolled. At school meetings, teachers often described Eli as well-behaved. Marcus understood what they meant and what they didn't say. Once, long ago, Marcus had worn a uniform that demanded silence. It wasn't something he talked about. The memories sat quietly, like a door he'd closed but never locked. He had believed in rules once, in order, in the idea that doing the right thing would be enough. Then he had seen something he couldn't unsee. He'd spoken up, not loudly. Not publicly, just enough to be heard by the wrong people. What followed wasn't dramatic. No headlines, no apologies, just a slow erosion, missed shifts, sideways looks, a transfer that wasn't really a transfer at all. Eventually, the uniform was gone. So were the people who used to greet him by name. Marcus never told Eli the full story. Some truths, he believed, carried weight a child shouldn't have to hold. That afternoon, as they walked through the upscale shopping complex on their way home, Marcus felt it before he saw it. The subtle tightening in the air, the pause in movement, the way eyes lingered a second too long. Eli clutched his backpack strap, unaware of the shift but sensing it anyway. The compass rested heavy in Marcus's pocket. He adjusted his pace, slowed his steps. Instinct, not fear. He had learned when to brace himself. He just didn't know yet that this time, staying invisible wouldn't be enough. The security lights flickered on just as Marcus and Eli stepped into the open plaza. It was supposed to be a shortcut. Marble tiles reflected the glow from storefront windows. A fountain murmured at the center, its water lit a soft blue. Shoppers drifted past with bags in hand, conversations overlapping, footsteps echoing in uneven rhythm. Marcus felt it before anything happened, a tightening behind his ribs, a subtle shift in air, like pressure building before a storm. Eli's fingers curled tighter around his backpack strap. "Dad," he said quietly, "why is that man looking at us?" Marcus didn't turn right away. A uniform stood near the fountain's security, not police, but close enough to blur the difference. The man's gaze lingered too long, not curious. Assessing, Marcus slowed his pace. The footsteps behind them grew louder. "Hey, sir," Marcus stopped. "Yes," his voice stayed level. "Mind telling me where you're headed?" "Home." The security guard's eyes dropped to Eli, then back to Marcus. "You take shortcuts like this often." Marcus felt the heat rise behind his ribs, but he kept his shoulders loose. "Sometimes." The security guard circled half a step, boots scraping tile. People nearby began to slow. A woman paused mid-sip of her drink. Two teenagers angled their phones lower, pretending not to record. "Won't take long," the security guard said. "Just routine." Routine. Marcus knew that word. He had heard it used to explain 1,000 small humiliations. Eli shifted closer to him. "Dad," Eli whispered, "did we do something wrong?" "No," Marcus said immediately. "We didn't." The security guard raised a brow. "I didn't ask the kid." Around them, movement stalled. Conversations faltered. Footsteps hesitated. The open plaza tightened, attention pulling inward toward a single point. Eli's breathing quickened. The security guard's jaw set. "You people always," he stopped himself. The words hung there anyway, unfinished but unmistakable. A man near the fountain spoke up. "Hey," he said, "they're just going home." Another voice followed. "Yeah." "What's the problem?" Phones were no longer hidden. Eli's face crumpled. He tried to hold it back, but fear slipped out anyway, small, sharp, uncontrollable. Marcus moved without thinking. He stepped forward, placing himself fully between the security guard and his son. Not touching, not shouting, just refusing to give ground. Something inside him settled as he did it, quiet, irreversible. The fountain lights shifted, blue bleeding into red as the cycle changed. The security guard scanned the circle that had formed. Too many eyes, too many witnesses. His voice stayed low, edged with authority he was no longer fully sure of. "Take him and go. Don't make this something it doesn't need to be." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He took Eli's hand and walked, every step deliberate. Behind them, the noise slowly returned, but the space they left behind stayed charged, heavy with what everyone had just seen. Halfway across the plaza, Eli looked up, eyes wet. "Are we going to be in trouble?" Marcus squeezed his hand once. "I won't let that happen." They didn't speak until they were 3 blocks away. The sounds of the shopping complex faded behind them, laughter, music, water from the fountain, replaced by traffic hum and the dull rhythm of their footsteps on concrete. Eli's hand stayed locked in Marcus's, too tight. Marcus noticed, but he didn't pull away. "You didn't do anything wrong," Marcus said finally. Not loud, not rehearsed, just true. Eli nodded, but his face didn't relax. His eyes kept drifting to reflections in storefront windows, to shadows that stretched and shifted as cars passed. "Why did he stop us?" Eli asked. Marcus slowed. He had known this question would come. He just hadn't known how soon. "Sometimes," Marcus said carefully, "people decide who you are before you ever speak." "That's not fair," Eli said. "No," Marcus agreed. "It isn't." They reached the bus stop. The bench was cold, paint chipped at the edges. Marcus sat, guiding Eli beside him. The city kept moving around them, indifferent and relentless. A bus roared past without stopping. Eli's breathing finally steadied, but his shoulders stayed tense, like he was bracing for something that hadn't fully ended yet. "I thought you were going to get arrested," Eli admitted, staring at the ground. Marcus felt the words land deeper than he expected. "So did I," he thought, but didn't say. Instead, he reached into his pocket and felt the weight of the compass. Solid, familiar, he didn't take it out. "You know what I was thinking back there," Marcus said. Eli looked up. "I was thinking about how fast things can go wrong when you stay quiet too long." Eli frowned. "But you didn't yell." "No," Marcus said. "I didn't need to." Across the street, someone laughed too loudly. A siren wailed in the distance, then dissolved into the city noise. Eli leaned against his father's side, the way he always did when he was tired but trying not to show it. Are they going to come after us? He asked softly. Marcus swallowed. No, he said, but what happened doesn't disappear just because we walked away. The bus finally arrived. Doors hissed open. They stepped inside, choosing seats near the back. As the bus pulled away, the shopping complex vanished from view. Marcus watched the reflection of his son in the window, smaller than he should have had to feel, older than he should have needed to be. That night, Eli went quiet earlier than usual. Homework stayed unfinished. Dinner went half-eaten. When Marcus tucked him in, Eli hesitated, then asked, "If we didn't do anything wrong, why did it feel like we did?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed longer than planned. Because, he said slowly, sometimes the world points its finger first and asks questions later. Eli thought about that. So what do we do? Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. We remember who we are, he said. Even when someone else tries to decide for us. After the light went out, Marcus stood alone in the narrow hallway. The apartment was silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. He knew something had shifted. Not just for Eli, for him. Staying invisible had kept them safe before. Now, he wasn't sure it ever would again. The video didn't explode all at once. It crept. At first, it lived in quiet corners of the internet, shared without captions, passed along with questions instead of outrage. Someone had uploaded it from across the fountain, shaky and imperfect, the way real moments always are. By morning, it had a name. By afternoon, the internet had decided who was right and who deserved blame. Marcus found out the same way most people did, through a notification he hadn't asked for. His phone buzzed while he was tightening a loose hinge on the third floor of the office complex. He ignored it at first, then it buzzed again. And again, when he finally checked, his stomach tightened. Unknown number, missed call, another message, then one from his supervisor. Don't come in tomorrow. No explanation, no punctuation. Marcus stared at the screen longer than necessary. Around him, the building hummed, air vents whispering, keyboards clicking behind glass walls. Life continuing, uninterrupted. He finished the hinge anyway. That evening, a woman knocked on his door. She didn't look like the kind of person who knocked on doors unannounced. Her coat was neatly pressed, her posture straight but careful, as if she'd learned how to take up space without demanding it. She held a folder under one arm and kept her other hand visible, open. "Marcus Hale?" she asked. He nodded. "My name is Dana Whitmore," she said. "I'm a journalist." Marcus felt the air leave his chest slowly. "I'm not here to ambush you," she added, sensing the shift. "And I won't come in unless you invite me." From behind Marcus, Eli peeked around the doorframe. Dana noticed immediately. She lowered herself slightly, bringing her eyes level with Eli's. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Dana." Eli didn't answer. He tightened his grip on Marcus's shirt. Dana stood back up. "I won't stay long." Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the apartment looked smaller than usual. The light was soft, evening blue, stretching shadows across the walls. Dana didn't sit until Marcus did. "I saw the video," she said, "and then I started digging." Marcus said nothing. "I didn't expect to find your name," she continued. "At least not where I found it." She opened the folder, sliding out a single printed document. Then another, 10 years ago, she said, there was an internal report buried in a municipal archive about a housing enforcement sweep, illegal evictions, racial targeting. Marcus closed his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. Dana nodded. "You were one of 3 officers who objected, the only one who documented it." Eli shifted. Marcus felt it, like a hand pressing gently but firmly against his spine. "I didn't mean for it to go anywhere," Marcus said. "I just wrote what I saw." Dana's voice softened. "You saved families from being removed overnight." Marcus shook his head. "I slowed it down." "That's all, but you paid for it," she said. The words landed heavier than she intended. She paused. "I'm sorry." Marcus stared at the floor. The lines of the tile blurred together. "I lost the job," he said. "Not officially, not all at once." Just quietly, Dana nodded again. She'd heard this story before, in different forms, different cities. "What people don't know," she said, "is that your name never disappeared. It just stopped being spoken out loud." She slid another page forward. Eli leaned closer, curious despite himself. "What's that?" he asked. Marcus swallowed. "That," Dana said carefully, "is a commendation that was never issued." Eli frowned. "Why not?" Marcus didn't answer. Dana did, because it was easier to pretend the problem didn't exist than to admit someone had tried to stop it. Silence filled the room, thick but steady. Eli looked up at his father. "You were a good guy," he said, not a question. Marcus exhaled, something fragile loosening in his chest. "I tried to be," he said. Dana leaned forward. "The video, what happened at the shopping complex, people are reacting because they're seeing a pattern." And you're at the center of it. I don't want attention, Marcus said. I know, Dana replied. That's why this matters. She glanced at Eli, then back at Marcus. I won't run anything without your consent. But if you stay silent now, the story will be written without you, and it won't be kind. Marcus felt the compass in his pocket again, heavy, steady. What happens if I speak? He asked. Dana didn't lie. It won't be easy. Eli's voice cut through, small but clear. Dad, he said, they already think stuff about us. Marcus turned. Eli met his eyes, serious in a way that made Marcus ache. At least let them know who you really are. That night, Marcus slept poorly. Dreams blurred into memories, hallways that smelled like bleach clipboards, doors closing without slamming. He woke before dawn, the city still half asleep. For the first time in years, he didn't rush to disappear. The interview ran 2 days later. Dana framed it simply. No dramatic music, no accusations, just Marcus, his voice steady, his words careful. He spoke about procedure, about responsibility, about what happens when systems mistake silence for compliance. He spoke about his son, not as a victim, as a reason. The response was immediate. Former colleagues reached out, some in support, others in defense of their own quiet choices. Organizations requested comment. By evening, the shopping complex released a statement. By morning, the security firm suspended the officer pending review. Marcus watched it unfold from his kitchen table. Eli sat across from him, swinging his legs. They're saying your name on TV, Eli said, wide-eyed. Marcus nodded slowly. How does it feel? Eli asked. Marcus thought for a moment. Like I finally stopped carrying something alone, he said. Eli smiled. Not big, not loud, but proud. Later that afternoon, Marcus reached into his pocket and finally placed the compass on the table. The needle wavered. Then, for the first time in years, it settled. Not perfectly north, but close enough to keep going. The morning after the interview aired, Marcus stood at the sink longer than necessary, watching the coffee darken as it filled the mug. The radio murmured from the other room. Traffic, weather, a name mentioned once and then corrected. His name. He smiled without meaning to. It surprised him enough that a small laugh slipped out, low and breathy, like it didn't quite trust the moment yet. Eli padded in wearing socks that didn't match, dragging a blanket behind him like it was part of his body. They said you were calm, Eli said, climbing onto the chair. On TV, Marcus took a sip, burned his tongue. He didn't mind. I didn't feel calm, he said. Eli tilted his head. You sounded big, that did it. Marcus turned away so his son wouldn't see his face tighten, the way it always did when something good landed too close to something painful. They walked to school together that morning. The street looked the same cracked sidewalk, same corner store with the flickering sign, but people looked twice now. Some nodded. One woman pressed her hand to her chest and mouthed thank you without stopping. Marcus nodded back, unsure what to do with gratitude from strangers. In the parking lot after drop-off, he sat in the car with the engine running and nowhere urgent to be. His phone buzzed again. Another message, another voicemail. He didn't listen. Halfway down the block, he pulled over anyway. The steering wheel felt suddenly heavy under his hands. He leaned forward, forehead resting against it, a sound breaking out of him that didn't decide whether it wanted to be a laugh or something else. It came out uneven, messy, honest. When he finally straightened, his cheeks were wet. He wiped them with the heel of his palm and shook his head at himself, letting out a quiet huff that almost sounded amused. You always do this after, he muttered. Hold it too long. Weeks passed, heavy at first, then carrying him forward. The calls slowed. The headlines moved on, but some things stayed. A letter arrived from the city, formal and careful, acknowledging past oversights without quite admitting them. A community group invited him to speak, not as a symbol, they said, but as a person who had been there. Marcus didn't answer right away. One evening, he and Eli lay on the living room floor, pizza box between them, an old movie playing neither of them was really watching. Dad, Eli said, staring at the ceiling. Do good guys always get in trouble first? Marcus chuckled softly. It seems that way sometimes. Eli rolled onto his side. But they don't always lose. Marcus turned too. Their eyes met. No, he said. They don't. Later that night, Marcus tucked Eli in. As he turned to leave, Eli's voice followed him, already thick with sleep. You snore when you cry, Eli said. Marcus froze, then laughed quietly, carefully, so it wouldn't wake him back up. Go to sleep, he whispered. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of a small room filled with folding chairs and uneven expectations. He spoke without notes, without armor. His voice didn't shake this time. He talked about systems. About silence, about the cost of doing the right thing when no one is clapping yet. When he finished, there was no applause at first, just a pause. Then one person stood, then another. At home that night, Eli waited up. "How was it?" he asked. Marcus sat beside him on the couch. "Hard," he said. "And good." Eli nodded like that made sense. Later, as the apartment settled into its familiar quiet, Marcus reached into his pocket and took out the compass. He placed it on the table between them. The needle wavered. Eli leaned in, watching closely. Slowly the needle steadied, not perfect, not exact, but sure enough to trust. Marcus exhaled. "Looks like it knows where it's going," Eli said. Marcus smiled, warm and tired and full in a way he hadn't been for a long time. "So do we," he said. Spring arrived without asking permission. The tree outside Marcus's window bloomed unevenly, white petals clinging where they could, letting go where they couldn't. He noticed it one morning while tying his shoes, the light different somehow, less sharp, more forgiving. Eli noticed it too. "Looks like popcorn," he said, pressing his face to the glass. Marcus smiled. "The good kind." Life didn't turn miraculous. It softened. Marcus still worked early shifts, still packed lunches too fast, still forgot where he left his keys. But some mornings, his phone stayed quiet in a way that felt earned instead of lonely. At school pickup, another father nodded at him once. No words, just recognition. Marcus nodded back, the exchange small but steady, like a bridge being tested one careful step at a time. One afternoon, a letter arrived with no logo on the envelope. Inside was a short note, handwritten, uneven. "I saw myself in your silence. I'm trying to do better now." Marcus read it twice, then a third time slower. He folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with the compass, like something fragile that still mattered. That evening, Eli brought home a drawing. It showed two stick figures standing side by side, one taller, one smaller. Between them, a circle with a crooked arrow inside. "What's that?" Marcus asked. Eli shrugged. "It's you and me, and that thing you carry." Marcus laughed, surprised again by how quickly it came now, how little it hurt. "Does it work?" Eli asked. Marcus considered the question, really considered it. "Not perfectly," he said, "but it points us somewhere honest." Eli nodded, satisfied. Later, as night settled in, Marcus stood on the balcony, the city breathing below him, cars humming, voices drifting up in pieces, life doing what it always did. He rested his hands on the railing and let the air fill his lungs. For a long time, he'd believed that being good meant being quiet. Now he understood something else. Being good meant staying. Inside, Eli laughed at something on TV, the sound sudden and bright. Marcus shook his head, smiling, and turned back toward the light. The compass stayed on the table, unhidden, unashamed, pointing not north exactly, but forward. And this time, Marcus followed it without fear.